everyone.
Hi, Sabrina.
Let me.
Hey.
How's everyone doing today?
Good. It's so warm up here, up in the Northeast.
Yeah, it's warm here, but that's expected. We had like 2 days of it was like 60 degrees, and everyone in Texas is like, oh my God, it's beautiful. It's fall weather. And now it's like 90 degrees. It's gonna be like 90 degrees this weekend. So it was fake fall.
That's nuts.
I'm jealous of everyone who's getting like their leaves are changing. I'm like, yeah, that's cannot relate. It's probably gonna be like a solid 85 degrees like Halloween night, but we're good. We're used to it. It'll be fine.
It's definitely changing here, but it's like 75 degrees here today, which is like abnormally warm.
Oh, that's like beautiful. I would be
Yeah.
happy if it was in the 70s here. It is in the mornings. In the mornings, it's nice. It's like, oh, okay. And then you have to wear a little jacket. And then by the time it's like noon, you can't. It's hot. It's hot outside. My poor air condition like doesn't know it. It like kicks off, kicks on, kicks off, kicks on. Good time. Was that for us? Let's see. I gotta let everybody in.
Sabrina, you're the gatekeeper.
I know it's funny because it thinks I'm Amir, so Amir's also gonna join, and I wonder if it's gonna make me let Amir in as Amir. The multiverse. I think. Oh, we're already recording. Okay, perfect. I was gonna say, Asher, we actually usually record these as well, but I think we're already recording. Nobody say anything that they don't want recorded. I'm just kidding.
All right, I'll save all the good stuff then.
Yeah, save the good stuff. Let me give it a couple more minutes before we get started. I have to make sure everybody gets admitted in. So far, we're good. Okay. Amir is going to be joining us a little bit later today, but we'll be good. I'll be able to be the host and give you access and everything, Asher.
Sounds good. Here, I can present if you want. Give me one sec.
Yeah, we'll give it like one more minute before we get started. Amazing. Well, I think we can kick it off. Looks like you're already able to present. That's perfect. Awesome. Asher, this is some of the Syelo crew here. Everyone, this is Asher. We're going to be chatting about warmer jobs today, kind of seeing what it's all about. Looks like we've got a little demo set up. Asher, the way this usually works, I don't know if you've seen any of our other Syelo tanks, but typically you kind of go through your pitch. We'll give you some feedback at the end. We'll probably have some questions in the chat going on as well. We'll open it up at the end. But feel free to, you have the floor for the next 20 or so minutes. Let us know if you want to present anything, if I need to do anything on my end. It looks like we've already got this recorded, but everyone feel free to put your questions in the chat throughout. And then once we're done with the presentation, feel free to answer or ask any questions live as well. But we'll kick off, and I apologize, I'm going to turn my audio off for now because most likely I will be sneezing throughout this whole entire video. But if I need to come off mute or do anything, I will do so. And same thing for everybody else. If you have any questions you want to ask live, feel free to come off mute yourselves. And with that, we will get started. Floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Sabrina. Great to be here. Nice to meet you all. Yeah, I'll run through some quick slides here and then I'll do a demo. And I know I have seen some other videos of what goes on here, and I think this might be a slightly different type of product. So curious to see where it leads, and I appreciate you all taking the time. So um, yeah, so nice to meet you all. I'm building warmer jobs. The quick one-liner on warmer jobs is it's a way to see the jobs where your connections can refer you. So you've probably seen the problem on the, actually move the video, but um, if you all are working in the recruiting world, you've probably seen the other end of this, but cold applications rarely land you interviews as a job applicant, and they very rarely get you hired. And you've probably seen a proliferation of AI tools that have made mass applying easier. And it's, as recruiters, I'm guessing, has clouded your attention more and more people use these tools to maybe half-ass their applications when they apply, right? Which means that a lot of people who actually might be really smart and qualified for jobs don't invest the time and effort that it takes to do a proper cold application, which means that they stay jobless longer. Um, and the insight that I had, and I'll get into my background in a bit, is that referrals tend to get hired faster, and it tends to be less work. There's a lot more screening that's done up front when someone comes through a referral. And so I haven't seen very many tools that focus on making referrals easier, especially for the job searcher. And so that's at the core of warmer jobs, is that the insight is if you have a warm connection, it gets you a job faster. And so just smoothing that process for folks. Um, if you may have seen some of the stats around this, referrals tend to make up around 10% of applicants, but they make up 40 to 80% of interviews and hires, which means you can octuple your chances of landing a job if you come through a warm referral. Um, and this is a screenshot, and I'll give you a demo later of what the solution actually looks like right now. So right now, it's just a Google sheet. You can see a list of the open jobs that are in your network with your first degree LinkedIn connections on the right, as well as, and I'll get into this, but people through specific folks you've chosen that you actually know well who would make introductions for you also. And again, I'll demo more of this later. But right now, if you're trying to do this yourself, you don't have great alternatives. LinkedIn is the closest. There's an in your network filter on LinkedIn if you've played around with that. The problem with that is because LinkedIn monetizes based on the company, and you've probably paid to post jobs on LinkedIn before, a lot of those promoted posts get shoved in front of job seekers first, and there's only 10 results per page. And so job seekers many don't even know to skip through to, the 20th or 30th page to see the non-promoted posts. But there are a lot of posts that don't always perfectly match the job title they're looking for. The connections that they have at companies are often very weak. So LinkedIn will treat anyone who has gone to the same school as you as being quote unquote in your network. But you can't actually get a warm referral to a job through someone who you went to, some big public university with, right? So the way they define a connection is a little bit suspect. And there are some other platforms that people will search just in general for jobs in, let's say, tech, right? So Wellfound, the Dices of the world, all that sort of thing. Those are not oriented around warm connections right now. And a lot of them have limited coverage of the jobs that are actually open. So one thing that Warmer Jobs does on the back end is it actually navigates to the company sites of each of your LinkedIn connections, finds the career site, and then will sometimes actually type in the input field of the site the job title you're searching for. Like it goes to the DoorDash site and we'll type in software engineer and then pull from the results that show up. And so if you're looking for jobs, especially at smaller companies where they may not be using an ATS, they may just have a Notion page with jobs on it where the jobs are listed directly on the site. That's something else that Warmer Jobs can pull from and scrape in a way that a lot of these other platforms don't right now. So our unique value, I'd say there's three prongs to it. First is we are built around first degree connections and finding jobs through them. The second is these second degree connectors. So it's people who you actually know who would vouch for you when they make an introduction to someone in their network, right? So someone uploaded his wife's connections and got interviews that way, right? A former boss, a former coworker, career coaches and reverse recruiters are really good second degree connectors, that sort of thing. And then the last one, like I mentioned, is the fact that we actually scrape company career sites, and there is some AI involved in that. So what are some of the results I've been seeing? Users are getting interviews everywhere from Airbnb and Coinbase and your larger tech companies to smaller startups. Government jobs, there's a user who learned from their connection at the Federal Reserve what keywords to put in their resume to actually get in the door so that it would get looked at by the Federal Reserve. And a lot of early customers love it. So you can see some quotes here around how much time they're saving, right? If you're doing this manually yourself, you'd have to go through each of your connections every day and spend 8 to 10 hours a day searching the company websites for these jobs, which is, no one does that. It's too unfeasible, right? So um, those are some quotes, some quick numbers. So it's fully bootstrapped. It's just me. I'm working on it right now. Got 20 active users, 1K MRR, 700 people on the wait list, and it's searched over 50,000 companies so far. And right now I'm gearing up for a larger launch to make the alpha public so that anyone can use it with a free tier. That's the big thing in the works right now. Some quick background on me. So I have a weird mix of software engineering and marketing and recruiting as my background. So I formerly founded Demand Curve, which is a YC company that did marketing training. And a lot of my background before that was in code boot camps. So I went through and then taught at and wore a bunch of hats at App Academy, which was one of the first income share coding boot camps where you pay once you get a job. I've helped hundreds of job seekers land jobs at companies like Google, Uber, also a bunch of smaller companies. And again, my background's a mix of software engineering and marketing and recruiting. So this is sort of the culmination of all of this for me. So if you want to play around with it yourself, even during the demo, you're welcome to. It's at app.warmerjobs.com, and I have a free trial code for you all, so you can try out the current version of the free tier and play around yourself. And with that, I will do a demo unless we have questions.
Any questions from anybody before we jump into the demo? And y'all feel free to post questions in the chat as well. I'll be checking it.
All right.
Go ahead, Asher.
So the way it works is, and I won't show the setup process just because it's a little bit long, but you can export your LinkedIn connections and then you upload them to the tool. You can set your basic filters, so choose whatever job title you're searching for. We can say growth marketing here. The seniority you want, so anywhere from entry and mid-level all the way through VP or C-level, whether it's remote or hybrid. The locations you want. There's also some advanced filters, so if you don't want to work for certain companies or you don't want to see jobs at your current company, that kind of thing, you type it here. If there are job titles with words you don't want, maybe healthcare, security, whatever it is, you can type them here. Some people like to see remote jobs outside of the US and Canada, so you can choose that. Some people like to see jobs that just have shown up in the Warmer Jobs network, even if they don't have a connection themselves, because a lot of people just like to discover new jobs. So that's an option that I've learned people want that's in there. You probably know that the sooner that you reach out to a job, the more likely you are to hear back. So you can specify how fresh a job is for you if you want to see those in a separate section, and I'll show you those in a sec. And then, yeah, hiding jobs you've seen before is more of an organizational thing. Here's the connections that I told, or sorry, this is different. You can also manage your connections. So if there are people who you're connected with on LinkedIn who you forget how you know them, or you don't, you couldn't ask them for an intro, you can always ignore them. So if I don't know Adil, right, I could ignore him here. And connectors are these people who can upload their connections for you so you can see jobs in their network also. You can set that up here. So the way this all ends up working out is you end up with a sheet that looks like this. So this was a search that I ran for growth marketing a few days ago. And these freshest jobs show up at the top, right? So you can see when it can pull in the date. It'll pull in the date that the job post was last updated. Again, trying to get to those fresher jobs just because it's better signal for job seekers. There's the company name, a link to the job post. So if I click that, it takes me to the job post on Amazon here. The location, and then all of the first degree contacts that you have at that company. So these are all people I know or have worked with before in some way on the right. And you can scroll through. There's matching locations. So this was for jobs in SF and New York in the Bay Area. And remote jobs underneath that. And then it's still not perfect at picking out all of the locations. And there's some ATSs that on the results page, they show that there are 5 locations, but they don't show the specific ones. So that's something I'm working on fleshing out better. But for now, they show up in this sort of diamonds in the rough section. And then below that, there's, because I set the option, you can see just all the jobs that are relevant that showed up in the Warmer Jobs network too. So those show up at the bottom. And that's pretty much it. So again, the goal is just to show you all the jobs where you can get warm intros, and that's really been the focus so far. And I have some questions because I know most folks here are on the company side and the recruiting side, but I think I'll end it here and open it up to a Q&A for folks who are interested. Yeah, Danny.
Hi. I'm sorry if you covered this before, but I guess how does the algorithm scrape from available jobs? Is there a latency around freshness of jobs? So if there's jobs that are maybe longer in the tooth than others, ideally you would know that there's the ability to or capacity to be able to apply for those.
Yeah, good question. So the first part was around freshness and how the scraping works. So jobs are fresh as of every 2 days on the most standard plan. It can be every day. So there's like a starter plan and a pro plan, which I'm happy to get into if you want to talk pricing. But it can be as frequent as every day as far as freshness. And then I think you said something about auto applying. Was that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so right now there isn't a way built out. And I think most of the ways that users have been applying for jobs because they actually know the people there is they're really just sending a text to people they already know. Sometimes it's a DM on LinkedIn, that kind of thing. But by reaching out first, they're learning that there's other paths into a company before they even apply cold. So in a lot of cases, it's, they get introduced directly to the hiring manager who then sort of tells them what they want or what they're looking for in the application. And so they then apply. And so it's tricky with these sorts of things because there are hidden application tracks to automate the application process. And there are tools that do that just to apply cold, right? Like applyall.com, and there's a whole bunch of others. But that hasn't been the focus so far just because a lot of these folks, they're just sending text to friends. It's super quick, and then they learn like the right way to apply based on that too.
Yeah, sure. We have a couple of questions real quick in the chat. So I think you mentioned this right at the beginning, but we had a few people join after. So where are the jobs scraped from? We'll start there.
Yeah. So jobs are scraped directly from company career sites. So the way the tool works is it goes through each of your connections and finds the company name, finds then the company website from that, navigates to the career site. There's a bunch of logic around if it has an ATS pulling from the ATS, but in the event that there isn't one, it will actually use AI and just scrape the site directly also. So good example is with smaller startups, right? They tend to use Notion pages or just list jobs directly on the site. And so that's one where the tool will actually just go and scrape the site.
And it sounds like this tool is mostly for job seekers, so they would be essentially the ones paying for the service.
Yeah, that's right. And they are. Yeah.
Awesome. I think Danny had one more question as well. Does the algorithm assume that first degree connections are potentially stronger than, let's say, third degree connections to be able to do warm intros?
Yeah, good question. I'd say, yeah, right now the assumption is your first degree connections are going to be the best signal. And then when it comes to second or third degree connections that you have, or I guess your first degree connections can introduce you to your second degree connections. And if there's a second or third degree connection who you actually know pretty well, who's not captured in those first degree connections, that's where you'd add them as a connector so that they can upload their own network for you too.
Awesome. This is a LinkedIn concern. I think we've actually asked this for most of our Syelo tank pitches because LinkedIn's trying to crack down on everyone.
Yeah.
What concerns do you have that LinkedIn will build a filter function where you can filter LinkedIn jobs where most people are looking by connections?
Yeah, I think so. My first answer is that it seems like they already have it, right? So they have this in your network flag that's on their jobs page. And I think there's some competing incentives around it. So one that I mentioned was the fact that companies pay to promote jobs. And so that ends up muddying the results for job seekers. So I think if they were to try it, they'd have to fix the people not knowing people in their network, like get rid of the companies, or sorry, the school you went to being like a key connection point, right? And then I think they'd also have to change the way that they monetize it. And so my impression is, and you may know better than me, but I think folks pay a lot of money to promote jobs on LinkedIn. And so they'd have to kill that revenue stream and then change the way that they structure the product, I think. And I think they could. I think it's very possible. I don't see it happening in the medium to long term right now, but it could be something they do. And if they do, like that makes me really happy because people get jobs faster that way.
So just to clarify, with LinkedIn jobs, you can pay to promote a job, but there are also a lot of jobs that are on there just free promotion. Like anytime I post a job through Rippling, I can post it for 60 days on LinkedIn without having to promote it. So there's a ton of jobs on there that are not promoted, that they're just kind of scraping through where you post from, I guess, through like a Rippling or wherever your ATS is posting from. So a lot of that going on. So not necessarily having to pay to get your jobs up, just to clarify that point.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I'm curious how many good applications you get from that process too. Maybe I'll save this for the reverse Q&A, but you know, if I
That's
see,
okay.
oh yeah.
I don't promote any of my jobs. So all of my good applicants, and I've been receiving amazing inbound applicants, and I know that it's the market right now. But I haven't had to promote any jobs on LinkedIn in over a year to receive good applicants.
Great.
Um, we have another question in the chat. So Consuelo asked, just in case you like, so a lot of times your first connections, they could be like people that you're in a group with that you may not have talked to for 12 years. Does it help in any way with like messaging to these connections?
Yeah, definitely. The exercise I like to have job seekers do is they put themselves in the shoes of if that person had reached out to them for a job at their company, how they would react. And realizing that a lot of people just want to help people. If you can reference the shared context or memory that you have just to jog their brain, it's like, hey, here's how we're connected or how I know you. I think that can help grease the wheels for it. But I think that there's only upside to it. I've definitely heard stories of folks reaching out to people who they didn't even know on LinkedIn, but still getting a warm referral to the company and getting fast tracked through that. So it's not a guarantee, but I think it does help. So
I have a big question for you. I, for a little brief moment of my life, worked at a company called Findem, and part of their platform was the reverse of this. So it was actually for recruiters, for TA professionals, where it essentially found you referrals in your own company so that you could reach out to like employees at your current company and say, hey, you're connected with this person. Can you give me a referral? Because we also like referrals. Like they typically go through the process faster. They're typically just better. They just do better in the pipeline. Have you thought about like kind of reverse engineering this for specifically like recruiters or talent professionals so that we can also find referrals or like be
that
able to ping referrals?
that is precisely the question I wanted to ask you all about is what your
Love it.
processes are around this. And I'm curious where that tool fell short for you. It's something that it's a very natural next step of this, right? So I have my own answer for what I've seen at companies I've worked at, right? Of people, everyone when they join as part of onboarding, listing the top people they've worked with, right? Or exporting their connections. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm actually very curious to hear from you all what your processes are around sourcing warm referrals and getting these folks in the door top of funnel. Be very curious. Yeah.
Anyone want to kick off the referral process? I'm sure it's a little bit different for everybody, but anyone want to kick it off?
Sure. So ours is pretty loose. Here, I'll turn on my camera. And we are, creating some more rules around it. We're, going to message better about it. But, most places I've worked, the process isn't super formal. It's just like if you know somebody good, submit somebody good, and we'll I think our SLA for recruiting is going to be to, review all referrals within 48 hours. And we're going to have some rule where we don't necessarily need to reach out to them if we don't think that they're a fit. But that's kind of it. It's nothing over engineered for sure.
That's fair. When you market, or what do you do as far as asking current employees for referrals? Like, is that sort of they have to proactively do it? Is there an email that goes out? I'm curious what that process looks like.
Yeah. So in the past, and even like right now, it's sort of just, there's not really any good messaging around it. But we're putting a few things in place where at the monthly all hands, we're going to share the jobs. And at the quarterly all hands, we're going to talk through some of the people process stuff. Once we start making some hires through this new process, we are going to start sharing some of those metrics And then we're going to make a point to sort of verbally reward, in front of the team or in front of the company when they successfully place someone who's been around for 90 plus days, and just sort of like key in on, the impact that they're having. Um, and then what we're going to be building out is like the difference between a referral and a lead, where a lead is going to be like, hey, I've heard this person was good. I haven't sold them on the role, but you might want to reach out. Where a referral is like maybe something like, I worked with this person. I know they're amazing. They're waiting for your call. And there's going to be a tiered, monetary payout for each of those categories should they get hired.
Makes sense. Be curious if anyone else wants to share their process, especially for me, just because I'm also thinking about how to get more folks in the door for you two around. It sounds like all hands is one big place that these sorts of programs get, marketed, quote unquote, to internally. I'm curious where else, how else folks have tried to source in that way.
I have one. This is Shannon. Um, I'll turn on my video. At the second to last startup I worked at, we ran a promo like every time we had a super high volume or like high priority role. We would actually pay people like a small bonus or like a small stipend to submit a number of referrals. So I think we were paying like $10 or $15 per name that they would send us. And I would pop into like the engineering team stand up or the leadership meeting or something like that to let them know about a role specifically and let them know like, hey, this is how much we're going to run for this quick promo. If you guys, will submit 5 to 10 names by the end of the week, we'll make sure it gets on your next payroll cycle as a little bonus. And that was pretty successful because we required people to give a little blurb of why they were submitting this person. I think in a larger organization, it might get a little messy of, I'm just submitting 100 people so that I can get my $1,000 bonus. But in a small startup environment, that worked really, really well.
That's great. Yeah, I've heard of people trying to game the system at larger companies, and then there's some, Red Queen effect around that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Does anyone do the thing where they export or ask employees to export connections and then kind of go through and try to find candidates that are a degree away from those folks?
I had one of the startups I was at, the CEO specifically requested for me to do that with all of our engineers. And I was a team of one, so that was interesting. I will also say it was specifically for an engineering role, and like talent acquisition, we have so many connections. Like we're probably 1,000 connections plus. Engineers don't typically spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So while at first I was like, this is going to take forever, it took me like 2 hours and it didn't really yield many results because there's not a lot of, like, they don't really interact on LinkedIn with each other, with anyone, to be fair. I think it's very, like, that works for certain roles. Like if it is a sales role, that most likely could work. It just would take so much time and like resources, I think. But like specifically for like engineering, I think that would be tough. Yeah, and just so like the way that Findem did it via algorithms, so there was not like manual process, but it was running into the same thing, right? What we just talked about. LinkedIn sometimes matches people as first level connections that were like they were in the same group in 2005 or something like that. So yeah, I think it's very much like, how do you get the warmest connection? I think that's the main question.
Yeah. Yeah, that checks out. That makes a lot of sense. How do you find the warmest connection? Is it right now just kind of whatever comes inbound, or yeah, how do you do that?
For me in the past, it was word of mouth. It was literally like I've also worked at very, very small startups, so it was a lot easier to do that. But also when I worked at larger companies, it was a very large referral bonus. And we had this conversation a while back in the Syelo group, and I thought our referral bonus was large. We've seen some like large, large referral bonuses for sure.
Has anyone used what are these tools like Draftboard or any of these referral marketplaces? I see a bunch of startups popping up now where you kind of publicize the bounty, and then people can refer friends of friends, or recruiters might, work for the bounty, that kind of thing. Has anyone played with those? Fair enough.
I think it's always been done pretty manually, like via recruiters. I think all of us are typically the ones who are having to do it ourselves. So I don't know. It's interesting. The tools out there are interesting. I guess my question for you, so it sounds like this was already kind of an organic shift of like, how do we reverse engineer this and help talent acquisition, find the best referrals? I'm curious, like, have you talked to anyone? Like, what are your ideas so far? Like, what has been kind of the consensus so far?
Yeah, I think the main one right now is around, for those sorts of roles that do live on LinkedIn or anywhere else where your contacts are exportable, right? Maybe it even is Gmail or Twitter or something. But pooling together everyone's connections at a company, and then doing a lot of the filtering work and that algorithmic stuff that you were talking about, that at least shows you the short list of people who you can then ask people if they even know. And then I think making it easier for folks so that in the future they don't get asked about those people, so that it's not annoying for your engineers to keep saying, no, I don't know this person, stop asking me about them, right? And I think there's some work to be done there, but the first version is probably something like making it easier to just combine all your team members, especially at small companies, but I think just team by team, even at larger ones, who's actually on the team, who's a degree out in the network, who you can source through. So that's how I'm thinking about it right now.
I'd almost be curious if you've ever thought about like maybe partnering with some of these companies that incentivize things, right? Like just small incentives, like, hey, like if you submit a name or if you connect us with this person, you're gonna get an Amazon gift card. I don't know, something like that. I think
Right.
I think people just like to be incentivized for referrals. That's always been kind of the biggest thing. At smaller startups, it's a little bit easier. The incentive is like, oh my gosh, I am doing the work of three people, so I want to get somebody in the seat. But at larger companies, like I think they always kind of need a little bit of a push. So I would say like on that end, like maybe partnering with some kind of incentive program would be good. But also like kind of to Consuelo's point, being able to like draft AI messages or something like, hey, do you know this person, or vice versa? Like, I haven't talked to this person in a while, but let me draft this cool message that will get them intrigued with this.
Yeah, that makes, especially on the recruiter side, I think again on the job seeker side, it's easier to text, but on the recruiter side, it's like such a standard message. It sounds like you'd send, then yeah, like a lot of the streamlining that with AI and the templating and automating that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that checks out.
Any other questions for Asher? Want to have anything or tidbits, anything they want to add? Feedback is also welcome.
I almost wonder, have you gone to, like different ATSs or CRMs and see if there's some way that you can integrate with them? Because that might be like, if you have like a really slick intake form or way to do this, I'm sure that all of these other recruiting platforms would like pay your company to use that and figure it out, and just,
Oh,
like
interesting.
that might be a way to go about it.
Yeah, I haven't thought of it from that angle. That's a good idea. Yeah. I'm gonna make a note actually. Yeah, that's a very good idea.
Because like, and even, one thing that we're thinking about internally and what we're building out right now, because the area that I work in is very small, very startup, it's very much like a community, and like a lot of people know each other. So we're putting together something right now where we can try to be better about backdoor references. And I feel like this tool that you're building could almost be used for that, right? Like if you can easily plug into LinkedIn and just like, I don't have to do this, but a lot of our ops people are going through the process of like collecting connections and doing all this stuff manually and then putting it into a database and something that they can reference. But um, I know that that's not the intent of your platform, but that could be potentially another use case.
Yeah, interesting. So for the backdoor connections, that's not even the referrals a candidate gives you. That's just saying, do we know anyone else who we could even reach out to around that? And there's ops people working on that. Just so I have that right. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So like we don't have that much trouble getting people into process, thankfully. But so I worked in like the blockchain space. And so there's a lot of people who have, a lot of interesting things on their resume, but it's not maybe as fully of a vetted industry, right? So like you could find, and we hire globally, right? So like I could find someone in France, let's say, and they could say, "Oh, I worked for this name brand company and did these things," and like make it look really good, right? Um, but what we have found is you need to double check a lot of that kind of stuff, and so that's why we're going more the backdoor reference route. But like if we had connections, right, obviously it would be a lot easier to maybe connect some dots and find backdoor references for us. And I feel like that's something that we wouldn't pay a lot for it, but we would probably pay a little bit if it prevented our team from doing a lot of the work. And then if you're, doing all of this with like actual LinkedIn connections, let's say, and we could create some sort of like graph, like some connection graph, right? Like
Right.
that could that would be usable for us, and again, potentially something we would pay for.
That's interesting. Yeah. And what I'm taking from this too, and this is where I feel like LinkedIn can fall short because you can see people's connections on LinkedIn, but they're not always people they know, right? There's a lot of noise. And so my hope with this, and maybe it's a longer term thing for these background checks, is when there's enough signal on who people actually know, because they're ignoring connections they don't know, maybe even on the job seeker side, if there ends up being a way to plug that network in so that we actually know who knows each other, it might
Yeah.
save you a lot of time. So that makes sense.
The visual would help too, I think. Like literally having like a graph or like a map would be helpful. I was also just thinking too, like I don't know if you've ever like thought about this, but even for instance, like a community, something even like we're a smaller community, but we have job seekers in our community, and sometimes it's hard to know like where people are connected. So it's like kind of targeting from like a marketing or sales perspective, like communities, right? Like there's always going to be job seekers within smaller communities, and it would be so helpful because they know like we're all in the same community. That is to me a first level connection, a warmer connection. I think that would be cool too. Like to be able to say like, hey, you're in my community. I see you're at this job, like whatever this company, that'd be really helpful if I could get a referral.
Yeah, that's actually on the roadmap on the job seeker side too. Is exactly what you said. There's communities, all sorts of communities where you don't even have to be connected on LinkedIn directly, right? But pulling them in. And so, yes, that is on the roadmap. Well spotted. And I'm thinking also on the recruiter side, right? I'm trying to think if there are tools that do this now. I might have seen one and I forget the name where they will advertise job posts to niche communities for you. They'll post to the Lenny's newsletters of the world or what have you. Has anyone played around with those, or has anyone tried? I guess it sounds like top of funnel may not be an issue for folks right now either, but um, do
Yeah.
people post to communities like that?
I did in the past. I did like a couple years back. I think in the smaller startup world too, those are like that's where we get our candidates from when we're sourcing. But those tend to get like kind of pricey, and they're also not user friendly. A lot of those platforms, a lot of those tools, like for recruiters, they're not like if you've never used it before, they're not user friendly. Like they're kind of hard to navigate. It's hard to kind of get in with that platform. Um, but yeah, I think top of funnel is like not the biggest issue. Referrals though on the flip side would be helpful. Like I think that is always going to be, especially like when the market turns around again, because it will at some point. Being able to source through referrals is like it's always helpful. They
Yeah.
usually do go a little bit further in the interview process.
Yep. Yep. That's what I see too.
Awesome. Any other questions? Any other pieces of feedback for Asher? Awesome. Um, oh, Matt, do you want to say something? I saw you come off mute.
I'm just kind of clicking around. But
Okay.
I actually do maybe have one more thing to add. Like to y'all's point, like this is like the least candidate friendly market I've ever seen in like 15 to 20 years. So, obviously building for that in the now is probably top of mind. But it might be good to think about this like when the market shifts, right? And it goes to a very friendly candidate market. What do you do when that happens? So that you can kind of play both sides of it, right? And like your product, whenever you get it out there, you can sell in both markets.
Yeah. Well, if and when that happens, reach out to me and I can hopefully make your lives easier around that. So for now, but
Perfect.
I'll be thinking about it. Yeah.
Amazing. Awesome, Asher. Well, I'll connect with you if you don't mind to get that discount code. Thank you so
Sure.
much
I'll stay in
for
touch too.
sharing today. Any questions for us? Anything that we can answer for you on our end?
Yeah, I think you answered the main ones. My main ones were around how you do the referrals and the sourcing piece on the company side. So I think I'm happy. This was great information. Thank you all and good ideas here. And thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Asher. Thanks for everyone. Thanks for joining, and I'll share that discount code as well. We'll all connect, and yeah, this will be great. Thanks so much, Asher. Bye, everyone.